She was 11 years old when a powerful developer laughed and handed her a worthless strip of land as a joke at a county auction. And she said nothing, smiled, and folded the paperwork into her coat pocket. 3 years later, his entire project was frozen. His permits were denied, and his lawyer was making a phone call he never expected to make. Dale Whitmore's lawyer called at 7:43 in the morning. He did not say hello. He said the project was frozen. He said the permits had been denied. He said there was a water rights conflict on the eastern parcel, and it was registered in the name of a 14-year-old girl who hadn't lived in Dillon County in 3 years. Dale went silent. Then he said the name, Nora Calloway. His lawyer said yes. Dale had handed that parcel to her himself. 3 years earlier, the Dillon County summer auction smelled like burnt coffee and old folding tables. 8 parcels on the list. 4 locals in plastic chairs, a ceiling fan turning overhead that didn't cool anything. Dale arrived in a pressed white shirt. Nobody else wore a pressed shirt. He had a legal pad, a pen, and a paralegal named Trevor who had flagged one parcel as a possible problem, Parcel 7R. A decommissioned secondary well bore and a 40-foot access corridor registered as a shared water easement in 1961, inactive since 1989. No minimum bid, no takers. Dale's plan was simple. Buy it, bury it, move on. But the auctioneer said the parcel required a named transferee to close the record. A living person. A signature. Dale looked around the room. In the back row sat Jim Calloway, dryland farmer, quiet hands, worn boots. And beside him was his daughter. Nora was 11 years old. She wore a green cardigan. She had a spiral notebook open in her lap, and she was writing in it. She had been writing since the auction started. Dale walked over. He held out the paperwork. He said, "Here, sweetheart, sign your name. Call it a birthday present. It's just a hole in the ground." The 4 locals laughed. Jim started to speak. Nora touched his arm. She picked up the pen. She signed her name in careful block letters. Nora Calloway. Dale took the paperwork back. He made a small bow to the room. Trevor smiled. The auctioneer moved on to the next parcel. Nora folded the receipt they gave her and put it in her coat pocket. She did not look up. She did not smile. She opened her notebook and kept writing. Dale didn't notice. He had already forgotten her name. That evening, Jim drove them home on County Road 9 with the windows down. He didn't say anything for the first 10 miles. Then he said, "You didn't have to sign that." Nora said, "I wanted to." He looked at her. She was watching the fields out the window. Jim's wife Carol was in the kitchen when they got home. She poured 2 cups of coffee before she saw their faces. She poured a third. She said, "What happened?" Jim set his hat on the counter. He said, "Nora signed for something at the auction." Carol looked at Nora. Nora set her notebook on the kitchen table and opened it to the page she had been writing on during the drive home. Carol leaned over and read the page. She looked up. She said, "What is this?" Nora said, "Something I need to check." She did not explain further. She capped her pen. She closed the notebook. The receipt was still in her coat pocket. She did not take it out that night. She left the coat on the hook by the door, the same way she always did, the same way she would for the next 3 years. Outside, the fields were dry but not desperate. The aquifer beneath Dillon County ran deep and cold. Nobody thought about water except as something that came out of taps. Nobody except Nora. She sat at the kitchen table after Carol went to bed, after Jim fell asleep in his chair. She had her notebook and a glass of water and the county parcel map she had printed at the school library 2 weeks before the auction. She did not tell anyone she had printed it. She spread the map flat on the table and traced a line with her finger. Parcel 7R was a narrow corridor, 40 feet wide. It ran across 3 other parcels before it reached the road. To anyone looking at the map, it was nothing. A thin strip, a leftover, a clerical inconvenience. Nora looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at where the county's new zoning applications were clustered. She looked at the map again. She looked at her notebook. She picked up her pen and drew a small circle in the corner of the map. She wrote 3 numbers beside it. Then she put the pen down and looked at the ceiling for a moment. She knew something. She was 11 years old, and she was the only person in Dillon County who knew it. She closed the notebook. She would go to the library on Tuesday. Hold on, because what Nora found in that library basement is the part nobody talks about. Hit subscribe right now and don't go anywhere. The next part is where quiet turns into something nobody at that auction ever expected. October 14th, Dillon County Public Library, second floor. The microfilm machine hummed. Nora sat in front of it alone. She was 11 years old, and she was reading county records from 1961. The librarian, a woman named June, had shown her how to load the film 3 weeks earlier without asking many questions. June was good at that. She brought Nora a chair with better back support on the second visit and never mentioned it. Nora worked through the Tuesday afternoons the way someone cuts wood, one piece at a time, steady, no wasted motion. She was looking for the history of Parcel 7R. What she found was older than she expected. In 1961, 7 landowners in the eastern flatlands of Dillon County signed a cooperative agreement. They called it the Dillon Rural Water Cooperative. Each family put in $200 and the right of corridor access across their property. Together they drilled a single shared well, 340 feet deep, into the sandstone aquifer that ran beneath all 7 parcels. The cooperative worked for 28 years. Then, in 1989, 3 of the 7 parcels sold to the same buyer. That buyer assumed the cooperative had dissolved. He stopped paying the maintenance fees. He filed nothing. He told no one. He was wrong. Nora found the state filing on a Tuesday in November. Film reel 4 of 9, page 23. She read it twice. Then a third time. Under Kansas water law, a shared easement registered with the county and tied to an active aquifer source did not expire when a cooperative dissolved. It stayed in force until every original party, or their legal successor, signed a formal vacation order. Every original party. Nora looked at the list of 7 names from 1961. 6 of the parcels had changed hands. Most now belonged to LLCs she had been tracking in her notebook for 2 months. 3 were registered to the same holding company. She had written the name 4 times already. Crestfield Agricultural Holdings. The 7th parcel was Parcel 7R. She had signed for it 2 months ago at a folding table, while a man in a pressed shirt laughed. Nora took out her pencil and drew a small star beside the 7th name on the list. She did not write anything else. She sat there for a long time with the hum of the machine. She drew the map at the kitchen table in February. Pencil first, then red pen for the lines that mattered. Carol came in from the cold and looked over her shoulder. 7 parcels, access corridors marked in red, the cooperative route running like a thread through all of them, 40 feet wide, connecting to the well bore at the center. Carol said, "What is this?" Nora said, "A water corridor that never got closed." Carol looked at the red lines. She said, "And you own part of it." Nora said, "The last part." Carol pulled out a chair and sat down. She looked at the map for a moment. She looked at her daughter. She said, "Does anyone know that?" Nora turned the map over. On the back she had drawn the projected path of Crestfield's Eastern Development Corridor, pulled from a zoning application the county had posted in September. She had printed it at the school library and traced it by hand. The red line ran directly across Parcel 7R. Carol put both hands flat on the table. She did not say anything for a long time. Then the kettle started to whistle and she got up to take it off the burner. Spring came. Nora watched. She noticed the survey flags that appeared along County Road 9 in April. Orange plastic on thin wire stems, pushed into the dirt at 30-foot intervals. She counted 14 of them on the east side of the road over a stretch of half a mile. She wrote the number in her notebook. She noticed the tire tracks in the field access lane beside Parcel 4, wide set, heavy, the kind left by a truck pulling equipment. She looked at the tracks 2 mornings in a row before school. She wrote the dates. She checked the county recorder's website every Monday. In March, 2 more parcels on the eastern edge transferred to LLCs with names she didn't recognize. By May, she had traced 4 of them back to Crestfield through state business registration records. She wrote the LLC names in her notebook under the heading, Crestfield, confirmed. She had started the notebook the night of the auction. Carol had given it to her for her birthday the previous spring. Plain green cover, lined pages, her name written inside the front cover in Carol's handwriting. Nora had used it for school notes until July. After the auction, she used it for only one thing. In June, a water development permit application appeared in the county planning queue. Applicant, Crestfield Agricultural Holdings. Location, Eastern Parcel Cluster, Dillon County. Intended use, agricultural supply infrastructure, groundwater extraction. Access route, County Road 9 Eastern Corridor. Nora read the application 3 times on the library computer. She printed it out. She folded the paper in half and put it in the front pocket of her notebook. Then she pulled out the county map, the one with the red lines. She laid it on the library table next to the printed application. The access route Crestfield had listed ran through the easement corridor, through parcel 7R, through the 40 feet registered in her name. Crestfield had 280 acres. They had permits, LLCs, lawyers, and a planning application already in the queue. They had 6 of the 7 parcel signatures they needed to vacate the water easement. They needed 1 more. Nora closed the notebook. She already had her answer. She had known it since February. She just needed to wait for them to ask. The man on the porch was holding a number. Nora heard the knock at 4:15 on a Tuesday afternoon and opened the front door to find a young real estate agent in a blue blazer standing on the porch steps. He had a clipboard. He had a smile he had practiced. He introduced himself as Patrick, from a property services firm out of Salina. He said, "We'd like to offer you $600 for parcel 7R. Nora said, "No thank you, Patrick." He blinked. He said, "It's a fair market value for a non-productive parcel of that size." She said, "I know." He said, "Is there a number that would work better for you?" She said, "No." Patrick drove away. He had not been invited inside. Dale Whitmore heard about the refusal 2 days later. He made a call to his land coordinator. He said, "Go higher." His coordinator said, "How much higher?" Dale said, "It's 40 feet of dead easement. Don't spend more than $2,000. She's 12 years old." His coordinator said he'd send a letter. The letter arrived on a Thursday. Nora read it at the kitchen table. It offered $1,400. It cited the easement's inactivity since 1989 and used the word dormant 3 times. She filed it in the back of her notebook under a section she had labeled Offers. She did not respond. Spring, the next year. Nora turned 13. Carol baked a small cake. Jim sat at the kitchen table with his coffee. Nora's older cousin Elaine called from Wichita and talked for 20 minutes about nothing in particular. When Carol took the phone, Elaine said, "How is she doing?" Carol said, "She's reading county filings." Elaine said, "Still?" Carol said, "She keeps a notebook." There was a pause. Elaine said, "Tell her I said hi." The county called in September. Not a letter this time, a voice. A man named Dowd from the planning office, calm and official, who said the county was exploring administrative options for resolving inactive corridor easements in the Eastern District. He said the county was prepared to offer Nora $3,200 for a formal vacation filing on parcel 7R. He said, "This is a straightforward process, Miss Calloway." Nora said, "I'm sure it is." He said, "Do you have any questions about the terms?" She said, "No." He said, "So you'll consider it?" She said, "No." He said, "I'm sorry?" She said, "I won't consider it." The line was quiet for 4 seconds. He said, "Can I ask why?" She said, "I like it the way it is." She thanked him and hung up. Carol was standing in the kitchen doorway. She said, "The county?" Nora said, "Yes." Carol said, "What did you say?" Nora said, "No." Carol turned back to the stove without asking anything else. She understood by now. She had understood for a while. In Crestfield's regional office in Salina, Dale Whitmore sat in a glass-walled conference room with his project coordinator and 2 lawyers. The Eastern development was approved. The permits were in progress. The groundwater extraction plan had been submitted. The entire project rested on a single remaining step, vacating the 1961 easement. One of the lawyers said, "She's not going to take the county offer." Dale said, "She's 13. The lawyer said, "She's 13, and she's said no to 3 approaches." Dale said, "Then go in person." The lawyer said, "You want to go to the farm?" Dale said, "Send Hargrove. He closes everything." November. A black SUV stopped at the end of the Calloway driveway. A man named Hargrove stepped out in a 3-piece suit. He carried a leather briefcase. He walked to the front door and knocked twice. Jim answered. Hargrove said, "I'm here on behalf of Crestfield Agricultural Holdings. I'd like a few minutes of your daughter's time, if that's all right." Jim stepped aside. Nora was at the kitchen table. She had the notebook closed in front of her. She had made coffee. She did not offer Hargrove any. He sat across from her. He opened the briefcase. He placed a single sheet of paper on the table. He said, Crestfield is prepared to offer $31,000 for a voluntary vacation of the easement on parcel 7R. That's a final number. Nora looked at the paper. She looked at him. She said no. Hargrove said, Miss Calloway, the easement has been inactive for over 30 years. You're not using the well. Nobody is using the well. She said, that's true. He said, so there's no practical reason to hold it. She said, I disagree. He said, what reason could you possibly have? She said, I don't think I need to explain that to you. Hargrove picked up the paper. He put it back in the briefcase. He closed the clasp. He said, the offer won't come back at this number. She said, I know. He stood. He walked to the door. He turned once. She was already writing in the notebook. That night, Carol sat beside Nora at the kitchen table while Jim watched television in the other room. The offers were written in the back of the notebook in a column. $600, $1,400, $3,200, $31,000. Carol looked at the column. She said, how long do you plan to wait? Nora said, until they have no choice. Carol looked at her for a long moment. Then she said, okay, that was all she said. Nora paid the annual easement maintenance tax in April of every year, $47. She mailed a check to the county assessor's office. She had done it 3 years in a row. She kept every receipt. The next spring, the county posted updated aquifer depth projections on their planning website. 2 agricultural cooperatives in the Eastern District started contingency planning. A drought watch was issued for 5 counties in July. Crestfield's groundwater extraction permit was approved. Their construction timeline was set. Their financing was locked, except for the easement. Dale flew in from Kansas City for a board meeting in October. He sat at the head of the table and looked at the project timeline. A yellow flag sat next to the access corridor item. It had been yellow for 14 months. He said, what is the current status of the Calloway parcel? His coordinator said, unresolved. He said, offer her $60,000. His lawyer said, we did. He said, when? She said, 2 weeks ago. By mail. He said, and? She slid a single sheet of paper across the table. Nora's response was 3 sentences. It said she had received the offer. It said she was not interested in selling. It said she wished Crestfield well. She had signed it in careful block letters. Nora Calloway. Dale stared at the paper. He had written that name on auction paperwork 3 years ago as a joke. On a quiet morning in December, the phone on the kitchen counter lit up. The number was unfamiliar. A Salina area code. Nora dried her hands on a dish towel. She looked at the phone for one breath. She picked it up. Before Nora said hello, the voice on the other end was already talking. It was Hargrove. He said Crestfield was prepared to make a final, direct offer. He said the number was $92,000. He said he needed an answer by Friday. Nora said, I'm not selling. Hargrove went quiet. She said, but I'll talk about other arrangements. He said, what kind of arrangements? She said, I'll have someone call you. She hung up before he could respond. She stood at the kitchen counter for a moment. Then she walked to the living room doorway. Carol was sitting in the chair by the window with a book. Nora said, I think we need Elaine. Carol looked up. She said, I'll call her tonight. Elaine Calloway drove down from Wichita on a Saturday morning. She was 31 years old and had been practicing water rights law for 6 years. She had a quiet voice and a quick mind, and she had been waiting for this call longer than Nora knew. She spread the permit file across the kitchen table next to the original deed and the notebook. She read in silence for 40 minutes. Jim made coffee. Carol cut a plate of bread. Nobody spoke. Elaine turned to the back of the notebook where Nora had kept the column of offers. She read the column from top to bottom. She said, you never sold. Nora said no. Elaine said, and the maintenance tax? Nora got up and went to her room. She came back with a small envelope. Inside was every receipt from every April payment. $47 each. 14 receipts in a row, going back to the year she signed for the parcel. Elaine held the stack in one hand. She said, they're going to claim abandonment. Nora said, I know. Elaine set the receipts on the table next to the notebook. She said, they won't win. The abandonment hearing was held in a county meeting room on a gray Thursday in March. Hargrove's firm sent 2 lawyers. They brought a surveyor's report and 3 exhibits. Their argument was simple. The well bore had been non-operational since 1989. The cooperative had dissolved. 30-plus years of non-use constituted abandonment under Kansas law. A majority of parcel holders, 6 of 7, had signed a vacation order. Only one signature remained outstanding. They asked the hearing officer to override Nora's refusal on grounds of abandonment. Elaine placed 3 documents on the table. The first was the original 1961 cooperative filing with all 7 signatures, including the one that had transferred to Nora. The second was the state water law. Notice confirming that unanimous, not majority, consent was required for vacation when an easement was registered to an active aquifer source. The third was a printout from the county tax records showing 14 consecutive annual payments on parcel 7R, every spring. Every year, $47 each. No gaps. Elaine said, "You cannot claim abandonment on a parcel that the county itself billed every year, and that the holder paid every year, without a single missed payment." She said it once. She did not repeat it. The hearing officer looked at the stack of tax records. He ruled in under 4 minutes. Hargrove's lead lawyer reached for his phone before the ruling was fully read aloud. 2 days later, Elaine called Nora. She said, "They want to settle." Nora said, "Terms." Elaine said, "They want to buy the parcel outright. Lump sum. They're talking $150,000. Nora said, "No lump sum." Elaine said, "That's what I told them you'd say." She said, "Here's what I offered instead." She read the terms slowly. A permanent easement lease. Monthly payment of $3,400, adjusted for inflation each year. Transferable to Nora's heirs. In force for as long as Crestfield, or any successor entity, used the eastern parcel for agricultural or commercial groundwater purposes. Hargrove had pushed back twice, she said. Then he accepted every term. Nora said, "Okay." Elaine said, "That's it? Okay?" Nora said, "Yes." She hung up and walked to the kitchen. Carol was standing at the stove with her back turned. Nora said, "It's done." Carol didn't turn around. She reached over and put the kettle on. That was enough. The signing was at the county clerk's office on a Tuesday. A bright room, 2 clerks, fluorescent lights. 4 documents, 4 signatures. Nora signed her name the same way she had signed it 14 years ago at a folding table, while a man in a pressed shirt laughed. Nora Calloway. She walked out to her truck. She opened the green notebook on the steering wheel. She turned to the last blank page. She wrote one line, $3,400 a month, every month, forever. The well is still there. She closed the notebook. Across town, Dale Whitmore saw the notice in the county planning update 3 days later. He read it once. He put the paper down. He did not comment. At the diner on Main Street, 2 of the men who had been at the auction 14 years ago sat in the same booth they always used. One of them had a copy of the planning update folded next to his coffee cup. He looked at the other man. Neither of them said anything. Some men see a strip of land and count what it's worth that day. Nora counted what it would cost them to go around it. Drop a comment below. Would you have taken the $150,000 lump sum or held out for the monthly deal? Because Nora's answer will keep paying long after that check would have been spent.